Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to the comprehensive guide to the Victory Bells combat system, presented by Uber. The game really simulates naval combat to a much deeper degree than pretty much any other sort of ship girls type game on the market, and a lot of the mechanics it has are, frankly, just obtuse, poorly explained, or simply hidden away from the player in the game. My hope with this video is that you'll be able to take away exactly what's going on in a Victory Bells battle, as well as give you a primer for the next video I have planned, which is going to be all about the R&D system, how to optimize your gear for clearing the hardest content the game has to offer. The majority of the content I'll be presenting in this video comes from the Battles Wiki document, originally put together by Urza with help from Diff. I'd really like to extend my thanks to them and the rest of the Victory Bells Discord Skunkworks channel for helping to tease out a lot of the subtleties of this system. In this video I'll be covering the 5 phases of combat: starting conditions that affect the entire battle, air operations, which mainly consist of carrier operations, the surprise phase, which has torpedoes and anti-submarine, the gunnery phase, which is what most people care about, and finally divisional movement. This is the order that these take place during battle. Let's start off with conditions that will affect the entire battle. So we'll start off with scouting. The main purpose of scouting is to allow you to fire beyond what the weather and fire control would normally allow. In addition, seeing movements of Morgana fleets on the battle map is mostly a tangential benefit. To make use of scouting during a battle to fire beyond visual contact, a Bell needs to have at least one scout plane equipped. This means that all destroyers, the majority of submarines, and some cruisers are completely unable to make use of scouting due to lacking enough hangar space to equip even the smallest scout plane. There are 3 ways to have an enemy scouted during a battle. The first is to scout a node on the battle map and encounter a Morgana fleet while they are visible to you. The second is to shadow an enemy fleet with a submarine wolf pack, choose not to engage, then have a separate surface fleet engage the ships. Finally, when you're playing in auto mode, both sides are always automatically scouted, even during inclement weather or night actions, where in a regular battle you would not be able to scout the enemy. You can see here the 2 icons that indicate in battle whether you or the enemy have been scouted. Here, we've scouted the enemy, and they have scouted us. Scouting is closely tied to the weather, which also affects the starting range of engagement. As you can see from the description of this turbulent sea weather here, the base visibility is only 10,000 yards. To be able to see past this base visibility requires you to have scouted the enemy, or to pick them up on radar at the start of a battle. Maps with heavy cloud cover will prevent the use of aircraft, and rough seas can reduce gunnery accuracy or even prevent the use of torpedoes. Note that you can long press a map weather icon to see a description of its average weather, or you can long press a node in the sortie screen to see exactly what weather is currently at that node. Here I have a list of every weather in the game. You can see that the weather is ordered by BFT, the Beaufort wind scale, which in-game is used to represent the wind strength at the node. As wind strength increases, fire control efficiency decreases, and at 7 BFT and over, torpedoes are completely unavailable for both sides. Anything beyond light winds will impact your base visibility. However, any weather condition that allows aircraft will allow you to detect and fire upon enemies using spotting planes if the enemy was spotted before the battle starts. This chart will be included in the description along with other resources used. The next condition that will change how the battle plays out is the time of day. The time of day is either daytime or nighttime. Daytime provides no additional changes to the combat parameters. Nighttime, on the other hand, will limit you to point-blank range using your Director's Night Operations stat. Night battles are not affected by scouting, so you and the closest enemy division will always start at brawl range. Usually, this means that all 7 ships will start at point-blank. However, submarines can affect the starting range at nighttime. If ships don't have radar equipped, then the only way for them to fire on enemies is via light. This takes the form of spotlights and star shells. At 6 or 7 chevron engagement ranges, one enemy ship will be chosen to be lit up with a star shell. It and adjacent ships will become lit up and are now valid targets for your bells to fire at. At 8 chevron brawl range, each division, noted by the colored flag above the health bar, will choose one enemy to illuminate with a searchlight, and that ship will be a valid target for bells. And here we can see how star shells affect which enemy and allied ships are visible to the opposing side. So what are these chevron ranges I've been talking about? Simply put, the range between any 2 ships is represented as the sum of the chevrons that each ship has in front of them in the battle screen. Here we have a table of the 9 different possible ranges of engagement. Note, each ship calculates its range to every other enemy individually. In this example here to the right, you can see that Bliss has 4 chevrons. The first 4 Morganas have 0, and the rightmost has 2 chevrons. Consulting our table, we can see that the first 4 Morganas are at 4 chevrons, or 17,500 yards distance. And the range of the rightmost Morgana is 6 chevrons, or 12,500 yards. This means that the rightmost Morgana, who is the same class of ship as the other 4, is targeted first, as it is the closest and easiest to hit. Now we'll go over air operations, the first phase of combat. Air operations only govern fighter and strike aircraft. Despite having defensive combat stats, scout planes play no role in air operations, aside from whether you have entered a battle with the enemy scouted. We'll start with airstrikes on the map, as airstrikes during surface engagements follow the same rules. The only difference is that map airstrikes only last 1 round, while during a surface engagement, there could be potentially multiple airstrikes over subsequent rounds. We'll first go over what the attacking planes get to do first, then cover what the defenders are allowed to do to stay safe. We start with a dogfight between attacking fighters and defending fighters. Both sides get a bar representing how many fighters are participating in the dogfight. Any excess attacking fighters will not participate, while excess defensive fighters will be allowed to intercept enemy strike craft. Whether or not the attackers have won the dogfight, bombers will attempt to break through the fighter screen and strike the defending surface vessels. An important thing to note is that strike squads of dive bombers and torpedo bombers can only be up to 9 each, and any individual ship can only be targeted by 1 dive bomber squad and 2 torpedo bomber squads. This means that any more planes than 63 dive bombers and 126 torpedo bombers will not contribute to a strike. Finally, after the strike is complete, all surviving planes from both sides retreat. So, what do the defenders get to do to keep themselves safe? To start off with, if the enemy was scouted before the fight, all fighters carried will be allowed to participate in the battle. If the enemy was not scouted, the fighter cover will consist of the combat air patrol and whatever fighters can be scrambled. A carrier's combat air patrol is all the fighters in the first slot which has any fighters, starting from the top hangar slot and moving counterclockwise. As for scrambled fighters, this will depend on your aircraft takeoff time stat, which is viewed in the Bell stat screen. For anti-aircraft guns, wing-mounted guns are allowed to fire at full efficiency. Each gun is randomly assigned 1 target to fire at. Bombers will only be targeted if the gun has sufficient elevation to hit the oncoming bomber, which means dive bombers cannot always be targeted by your anti-aircraft guns unless they have proper elevation. Centerline and casement mounted batteries only fire on planes at half efficiency, and centerline batteries can only choose to shoot 1 torpedo squad at a time. Finally, ships who are not being targeted by bombers during the current round can use their anti-aircraft guns to assist with the air defense of other friendly ships. Note that this means air defense is significantly more effective if the attacking carrier is using a default tactic that will only strike 1 ship at a time, instead of the full airstrike tactic that can saturate enemy air defense. So how does this change when we have just air combat in a regular battle? In this case, both sides will strike each other in turn. The player is allowed to go first. As before, there will be a furball with fighters from both sides participating. Though in this case, you will only be able to use fighters that are part of your combat air patrol and any fighters you can scramble. If you have not scouted the enemy, then you will only be able to scramble bombers. None will be present at the start of the fight. For both scrambled fighters and bombers, how many you can get airborne depend on the aircraft takeoff stat, which can be influenced by vectors and traits on your planes. When it comes to how your carriers will execute their strike, it will depend on your flagship's tactics. The airstrike tactic will strike as many targets as you have planes for, in descending order of priority based on the tactics. A coordinated strike or default strike will only strike the highest priority target, then wait for the next round to continue. This results in very inefficient airstrikes. Finally, defenders can use any remaining fighters after the furball to intercept enemy bombers. Note that this means to intercept all enemy bombers, you need to have a critical mass of fighters that can not only clear all enemy fighters, but then have enough left over to intercept all incoming strike groups. Next, we'll briefly cover the surprise phase, which includes torpedo launches and depth charges against enemy submarines. Firstly, for the surprise phase, anti-submarine attacks. Ships must be equipped with a quarterdeck weapon in order to engage enemy submarines. In addition, an ASDIC sonar is practically a necessity to effectively counter enemy subs. With a sonar system and depth charges, a ship will attempt to ping an enemy submarine. If the ping is successful, depth charges will be launched. More depth charges per attack, given by the number in the name of the depth charge system, and the dispersed firing mode will increase your hit probability. This is useful because any damage, no matter how small, will force a submarine to surface, where they will be exposed to your gunfire. These anti-submarine attacks can happen anywhere from 6 to 8 chevrons of range between the depth charge equipped ship and the enemy sub. Note that there are no planes that carry depth charges to counter enemy submarines. So, torpedo targeting. When your ships fire their torpedoes will depend on the flagship's tactics. If it's the first surprise phase of the battle, before anything else there will be a spotting check by all ships who have torpedoes equipped. This is modified by the amount of director redundancy on the ship, and the check must pass in order to fire torpedoes on the first round. Any torpedoes fired on subsequent rounds do not require a successful spotting check to fire. There are 3 different torpedo firing tactics. Default simply means to not fire torpedoes at all and wait until you've closed to a closer range. The regular torpedo attack is self-explanatory, and ships will fire torpedoes at their highest priority target at whatever range they currently are. Torpedo run works differently. Each ship with the torpedo run tactic will temporarily advance 1 chevron, then do their torpedo attack. Each division will do this torpedo run together, which can result in many torpedoes firing at a single target. After firing, they will retreat back to where they started before the gunnery phase. As for target priority, torpedoes will be aimed at the highest tonnage enemy within the division's flagship priority bracket. I'll cover these on the next slide, but here, the 1st Division's broad range torpedo attacks will wait for 8 chevrons of range, and then each ship will fire their torpedo load one by one, switching to a new target if their highest priority target is killed. Division 2 will start its torpedo targeting at 6 or 7 chevrons, where they will advance 1, ending up at either 7 or 8 depending on where they started, and firing their torpedoes. If they ended up at 8 chevrons, they will fire one by one. However, if they're at 7 chevrons, they will fire together. The reason for this I'll go over on that next slide. So when it comes to torpedo firing, there's a certain order to things that heavily incentivizes the use of your torps at 8 chevron brawl range if possible. First, initiative is used to determine what order Bells and Morganas will be allowed to fire their torpedoes. During firing, torpedoes that are launched from brawl range will immediately hit their target, allowing for you to see the damage, and crucially, means that if the torpedo salvo kills an enemy, your next ship won't waste her torps on the same target. Any torps fired from a longer range, this being 0 to 7, will not immediately strike the target. This not only means you have to wait a turn to see the damage, but also means that many torpedoes can be fired at a target that subsequently dies due to gunfire, or significantly too many torpedoes can end up being fired at the same target, wasting them. As for the difference between centerline, wing, and submerged mount torpedoes, centerline will dump all the torps you have on the first round that torpedoes are available. The other 2 will only fire half of the launchers in each battery. The rest will be saved for the next round, where they will be exhausted. You can see here on this screenshot that at 8 chevrons, the torpedoes show up in the battle overview and strike immediately. Next, I'll quickly go over a couple advanced mechanics about torpedoes. First is that director redundancy both increases your ability to fire torpedoes on the first surprise round of a combat encounter, but also contributes to spotting enemy torpedoes, which allows you to dodge them more easily. Next is the real kick in the sack that makes torpedoes scale quite poorly in the late game. The amount of damage a penetrating torpedo does is divided by the number of compartments the ship had when the salvo started hitting. This means a ship with 8 compartments will take 1/8 damage from being hit by a torpedo, even if flooding reduces the number of compartments the ship has left. This division means that Morgana capital ships are practically immune to HP damage from your torpedoes, and torpedo kills mainly need to come down to breaking all compartments, which results in an instant flooding hill regardless of remaining hit points. As Morgana HP scales into the stratosphere and torpedo damage does not, it makes mixed torpedo and gunnery strategies fairly redundant past the early game. Finally, the way that torpedoes spread seems to be independent based on which torpedo battery they are fired from. As you can see from this diagram, A single battery with 2 triple launchers will likely have worse accuracy than 2 batteries which each have a single launcher. What this means practically is that you end up needing to invest a lot of resources into your torpedo vestures, because you need the boosts for all 3 batteries if you want maximum accuracy. Now we're going to be getting into the most important phase of battle, which is the gunnery phase. The attention to detail here is really what makes Victory Bells blur the line between a simulation game and a casual gotcha. We'll start with a target acquisition and selection. Each division has its own targeting priority, and the batteries will be divvied up on a per division basis. Each battery will have a number of factors it uses to determine which enemy it wants to fire at. Most important is the flagship tactic, which gives a broad priority queue to start with. Next is hit chance, which can break ties between equally valid targets for a given priority, such as an enemy with a crippled engine, making it an easy target. Each battery will be delegated per division, one by one, going the order of main battery 1 for the first ship in the division, then main battery 1 of the second ship, till all main battery 1s have been allocated a target. Next, the battery 2s and 3s will be delegated in a similar fashion. Then light batteries 1 to 3. The tactic name will tell you how many batteries will target a specific ship before subsequent batteries will move on to the next target, either single, double, or triple. As ships get saturated by battery delegation, they get moved to the bottom of the priority queue, and will be targeted again if there are many batteries to be assigned. Here you can see Division 1 will delegate 1 battery at a time, and they will first target capital ships, then other ships in descending size order. When a battery is assigned to an enemy, if the battery does not actually have vision, it will not fire. This is usually a result of a failed radar check. For a brief look at the different possible target priorities for a division. Carrier focuses enemy carriers. Heavy focuses larger ships first. Light goes for light cruisers and destroyers first. Contre-torpillier prioritizes destroyers. And Fire at Will has equal target priority for everyone. Note that due to capital ships typically being larger and slower than other ship types, this tactic often results in similar firing priority to the heavy tactic, as they are easier to hit in the first place. Batteries will pay no heed to whether their gun's penetration is adequate for their target. Now that each battery knows what it wants to fire at, there are a variety of stats that need to be checked to determine a firing solution and calculate the eventual hit chance. First, the gun looks at the elevation necessary to hit the target assigned at the current range from an internal ballistics table. If the elevation the gun has is insufficient to hit the designated target, the battery will sit out this round. Next, a single firing control training stat is calculated. This takes into account a variety of ship stats: director accuracy, rangekeeper correction, gun dispersion, both horizontal and vertical, and your crew's fire control system training. Using this intermediate value, a final hit chance is calculated using many more external factors: the range of the target, the size of the target's profile, the speed of the target, taking into account critical damage sustained in previous rounds, weather penalties, tactics modifiers such as increased accuracy from barrage fire, and finally, flat hit chance bonuses from equipment traits. With all these values, the chance to hit is calculated. Each shell will then roll against this hit chance, and for each successful hit, you then roll for where on the enemy ship the shell will impact. So a shell has hit the enemy. Now we need to determine how much damage it should actually do. First up is a penetration check. There's an internal lookup table for each gun at each range, which determines the base amount of vertical and horizontal armor it can penetrate. Next, any penetration buffs that your ship has are added to this value. This is compared against the armor thickness of the impacted armor. The shell will either penetrate for non-penetration plus penetration damage, or it will simply shatter for non-penetration damage. Next is the actual formula for the damage that the shell does. I want to make it very clear that the War Shot tab in the game's UI is not always correct. Certain buffs do not stack the way you think they do, which results in the listed damage number usually not being the same as the damage number you'll actually get in a battle. The actual formula is as follows. The final damage you deal for either the non-pen damage or non-pen plus penetration damage is the base damage multiplied by 3 modifiers. First is 1 plus the sum of general ship damage bonuses and miscellaneous external bonuses that do not come on the gun itself. Second is 1 plus the sum of the same general ship damage bonuses plus the sum of equipment bonuses plus any conditional bonuses on the gun itself. And third is 1 plus the total amount of fleet damage bonuses your flagship has. Importantly, note that the general damage bonuses tagged ship are multiplied twice in this equation. This means that such bonuses are not just twice as effective, but actually scale in a square manner. If you can stack lots of these bonuses, your damage quickly reaches absurd territory. That these bonuses are also added to equipment or conditional bonuses additively means that these latter bonuses are actually less powerful than ship damage bonuses, and so are proportionally less important once you have stacked many damage buffs. Just for completion, battery damage vectors count as equipment bonuses in the calculation, added to raw damage bonuses that can go on the gun. Here we can see each of these different types of damage bonuses. Bonus just tagged as damage is an equipment bonus. Ship damage bonuses are ones that double stack, and conditional bonuses have their condition listed in dark blue text. Any damage effect that is not tagged as ship and comes on a different piece of gear, such as your rangekeeper or director, fall under the category of external bonuses. These are also very commonly bugged, and many of these cross-slot bonuses do not work, so testing is required to determine if each specific bonus is actually functioning properly. So, once your shell has been fired, hopefully it's hit and penetrated the target, the gun will need to reload. The first step of this process is depressing to the maximum load angle if the firing angle is higher than the angle at which the gun can be loaded. This happens at a rate corresponding to the gun's elevation rate stat in degrees per second. If the load angle is greater than or equal to the firing angle necessary for the current range, this step is essentially skipped and loading will commence immediately. The gun will then reload for its listed reload duration, plus a penalty for fatigue depending on the number of elapsed combat rounds. Fatigue -1 is multiplied by the current combat round -1 and added to the reload time. The gun will then elevate back to its necessary firing angle at the same elevation rate in degrees per second if applicable. We'll take this gun as an example. If we are firing on round 2 at a range that needs 25 degrees of elevation, first we depress back down to 10 degrees at 10.1 degrees per second. Next, we reload for the base reload time plus the fatigue penalty. Finally, we elevate back to 25 degrees to fire the next salvo. As a result, our gun with a 29.2 second reload actually takes around 33.8 seconds to complete a firing cycle. As the gunnery phase lasts for a total of 120 seconds maximum, improving your reload not only increases your DPS, but also the total amount of damage you can deal, as once that 120 second cutoff is reached, all guns will stop wherever they are in their loading cycle. As a quick aside, the barrage-fired gunnery tactic is supposed to reduce the reload of your guns, but this effect does not seem to be working properly currently. If a Morgana is killed, the battery does not simply sit idle for the rest of the round. The battery will decide whom to target next on its own, without consulting any other batteries to attempt to split fire. When this happens, it will simply choose the Morgana highest on the division's priority list. There will be no check for redundancy with other batteries focusing on the same target. What this means is that division will often all focus fire on a single target at a time after their initial targets die. Let's take a look at an example to show what I mean. So here we have 3 total targets. We want to see in what order these Morganas will die. First, we have to look at our apical batteries. In this case, we have 2 batteries available, main battery 1 and main battery 2. We then consult our division's tactic and see that we have single heavy targeting. In this case, main battery 1 will target the largest ship, which is the enemy battlecruiser. Main battery 2 will then have its pick of the 2 destroyers. It will choose to target the one with a higher displacement, as both destroyers have equal priority from the tactics point of view. Suppose now that the battlecruiser dies first. Main battery 1 will not continue with the original priority queue established during the divvying up of the initial battery targets. Instead, it will see also that the first destroyer is of a higher displacement and also begin focusing on it. Now finally, when the larger destroyer dies, both batteries will have become synchronized. Subsequent retargets will have both batteries firing at the same target for the rest of the round. Now, after gunnery is concluded, we hit the final phase of combat, which is movement. Thankfully, movement is a lot simpler than other phases. All divisions will move together according to the fleet tactic for the given range towards the closest enemy division. A division with default movement will add 1 chevron to each ship in the division. Flank speed will add 2 chevrons, and hold position or guard will add no chevrons to the division's ships. However, if no ship in the division has any valid targets, usually caused by being out of range, they will always move at least a minimum of 1 chevron so as to prevent a soft lock. Also note, if a division is at 8 chevrons with any enemy division, they will never advance any further. Finally, we'll cover reserves and retreating. All ships will only participate in a number of combat rounds equal to their reserve stat. Any fractional reserves at the end simply result in a % chance to stay at the end of the next round. For example, 0.75 reserves results in a 75% chance to stay the next round, then a guaranteed retreat. This is bypassed when there are chains in the battle UI. This indicates that the side who has chains is unable to retreat from battle. This mostly happens in auto mode, where both sides always have chains, but can also occur in campaign maps when the enemy is cornered on a node with no other exits. Here on auto, we can see that neither side is allowed to escape from this battle, even if they wanted to. This concludes the technical explanation of the Victory Bells combat loot, summed up as the combat cycle. The cycle consists of an airstrike, made up of a dogfight, furball, and bomber strikes, a surprise phase, where torpedoes are fired and ASW is used, a gunnery phase of 120 seconds, where all batteries fire as much as possible in the allotted time, and finally the movement phase, where divisions will advance and prepare for the next cycle. This cycle will repeat until all ships on one side are either dead or they've retreated. That sums up this intro to the combat system in Victory Bells. Hopefully, this has given you an appreciation for the immense amount of calculations going on behind the scenes to simulate the combat in the game. For the next video I have planned in this eventual series of Victory Bells deep dives, we'll be using our knowledge gained on how the combat works to be able to determine what the best way to build our equipment is. Thanks for watching.